What can we say about our guest for tonight? He's an Emmy Award-winning producer and writer. He's worked on The Simpsons since the start in 1989. He's been credited for over 500 episodes, been the showrunner for over 20 years. Also worked for American folks tuning in, if you remember, on the television animated series The Critic. It did not stink. It was a great show. And Al's personally been a writer or co-writer on some of the very greatest Simpsons episodes of all time, including one of my favorites, Humour, and many others. So keep that in mind. But today he's going to talk to us about humor and politics and what The Simpsons can tell us about predictions, the rest of the world, and everything. So welcome, Al. Well, let's all virtually welcome Al Jean here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Now listen up. We got an election to run under the strict supervision of heavily medicated octogenarians.
I'm gonna need to see 3 forms of ID, 12 if you're a Democrat.
Homer, get down here. Your vote for president has never been more important.
That's today? So vague.
You'll get down here this minute if you care about the 3 things you love most. Are you picturing the kids?
Yes, honey mustard. Let's see. I know who I want for all the judges and propositions, but president, that's a stumper. Can I write in Judge Judy?
You're hesitating over president? Dad, by all that's decent, how could you forget everything that's happened the last 4 years?
Oh, not sure what you're talking about. Oh, yeah. Well, that one was just funny. That was bad. That was worse. Someone made that up. Yikes. I gotta do something. Who are you gonna make fun of now, late night comics?
You slept all day? You didn't vote?
Hey, how bad could it be?
You owe me a new pair of glasses. Oh, that's what I get for voting for Kanye.
Just on that note, I'd like to say welcome to Humor, Politics, and How The Simpsons Predicts the Future. First of all, humor. In my opinion, something is either funny or it's not. On the other hand, I would like to point out that this lecture is free. Please weigh that heavily in your judgment, very heavily. Topic 2, politics. One overwhelming factor that determines the content of the show is that we are produced a year in advance, like the clip I just showed. We're actually amateur futurologists. We try to think not what's funny at the moment, not something that people are going to react to today, but what would be funny, what would be interesting 2, 5, 10 years from now. In the early days of the show, we wrote a joke about the Soviet Union. By the time the animation came back, the Soviet Union had broken up. Fortunately, it's getting back together, so the joke works again, and so all is well. The other thing I would like to say about politics is that when we started, we were a show that offended all comers. We've gotten numerous complaints from Christians about Bart's behavior, our portrayal of Ned Flanders, etc. But in 2007, as part of the promotion for the Simpsons movie, we put a giant chalk drawing of Homer next to the Kearney Abbas giant in Dorset. The giant is a huge figure of an erect man revered by pagans. They were hugely offended by the Homer nearby wearing tighty whities. My point, we've offended Christians and pagans. So we basically, everybody's pissed. Including the Catholics, as if they didn't have enough problems. In 1999, we ran a fake ad on our Super Bowl show depicting sexy nuns in high skirts and low-cut blouses saying, "The Catholic Church, we've made a few changes." Catholics organized a boycott. But in 2009, the Vatican newspaper L'Osservatore Romano lauded us for our realistic depiction of faith. So are we doing God's work, or are we the spawn of the devil? That's for you to decide. Hell if I know. Yet another way I can illustrate how no one knows what they are talking about, including me, concerns the best-selling t-shirt featuring Bart saying underachiever and proud of it. When my older daughter was in school, the handbook said no t-shirts allowed, e.g. Bart Simpson. When my younger daughter attended the same school several years later, the school was asking for Simpsons cells to use for the school auction. What does that prove? If you are around long enough, the counterculture becomes the culture. Which brings us to predictions. In our time on the air, we've predicted Donald Trump would become president. We predicted 9/11, a Nobel Prize winner, that the US would win a gold medal in curling, and that same year Sweden would finish second. We predicted the Ebola virus, COVID-19, murder, horrors, and numerous riots. And we also called Rupert Murdoch's Fox News not racist, but #1 with racists while we're on Fox. And we're proud of that. It's not a prediction, I like pointing it out. But truth be told, Donald Trump was a fringe candidate when we predicted his presidency in 2000. We predicted Ebola after watching a movie on Ebola, and the US has made some great strides in curling. What I would say about our predictions is, again, we're making educated guesses about the future. And more importantly, if you throw enough arrows, you hit enough bullseyes. And, for everything that we've predicted, I would say there are like a number of things we missed and a lot of things that people sort of retrofit our episodes to say, these were predictions when they were just, made in the moment. Now, a little bit about me. I was born on January 9th, 1961. So if you add it up, I turn 60 tomorrow. When evaluating this lecture, please bear that in mind. Also, that this lecture is free. I can't emphasize that enough. At 16, I went to Harvard, or Cambridge Junior, as you call it. I worked on the Harvard Lampoon. After college, I briefly worked on a sister publication, National Lampoon, located in New York City. We were there, not in the golden era, but in the Caligula phase. There was a lot of looting and burning going on. And while at that magazine, I co-authored an article about US Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall, in which he told the reader how to write pornography, since the judges read so much of it as part of their duties on the court. Years later, I found out that Justice Marshall had reported me to the FBI and recommended I be arrested. Very few arrests on Wednesday, but I was wanted by the FBI. Fortunately, the FBI reminded the justice of a thing called the First Amendment and freedom of speech. That is a true story. After National Lampoon, I came to LA and wrote on the film Airplane 2, which my brother called Airplane Too Much Like the First One. Then a show based on Not the 9 O'Clock News, which is from England, Alf, and it's Gary Shandling show. There, Sam Simon, who had been asked by Jim Brooks to develop Matt Groening's 30-second shorts into a series, offered me a 2-day-a-week summer job on The Simpsons in 1989. None of my friends wanted the gig working on a cartoon 2 days a week. It was the luckiest career move anybody ever made. What made The Simpsons unusual, I believe, is that while most animated series at the time had 1 or 2 writers at most, Sam envisioned a large Simpsons staff. Supervising all the writing was James L. Brooks, who in my opinion is the greatest TV writer that ever was. His earlier shows, such as The Mary Tyler Moore Show and Taxi, were known as much for their warmth and relatability as for their laugh-out-loud wit. Jim wanted The Simpsons to feature the same combination of heart and humor. Matt, who created the show, and Sam also envisioned a town, Springfield, that had everything in it: a local bar, a bowling alley, a place that used to be the local Pally. Kinks reference. Whoever you are, an idealist like Lisa, a crank like Grandpa, or a lonely perv like Mo the bartender, The Simpsons had a character for you. Many of the elements for the show's success can be found in Matt's shorts, and the rest were added in the scripts for the first and second seasons. There was one enormous hurdle, however. The reason animation had been so scarce on primetime is that it is extremely prohibitive in both cost and labor to produce animation on a weekly basis. Hanna-Barbera had solved the problem with numerous cost-cutting measures. Repeated backgrounds, limited movement, and derivative characters were part of the secret of their enormous success. We had to produce animation that would provide the emotion and humanity Jim wanted, and it wasn't easy. The first episode produced had a legendary first screening, legendary in its awfulness. The character designs were inconsistent, the acting poor, and there were bad offensive gags, I used the term in both meanings, inserted that were not in the script. At that screening, when the show concluded, there was a lengthy, awkward silence. Finally, Jim Brooks said, "It's shit." The head of animation asked him what he meant, and Jim said, "A foul-smelling object that no one wants to see." Luckily for me, I wasn't there. Luckily for the show, the next episode back, Bart the Genius, directed by David Silverman, was great. It was decided to move the series premiere later to December 17th, 1989, and to use a different first episode, the Christmas special, also directed by Silverman. When it aired, it was immediately the highest rated show in the history of the Fox network. When I wore my show jacket later that week, people wanted to buy it. I knew I'd somehow stumbled onto something that was unbelievably beloved. If I could, I'd like to talk a little bit about how that show, 13 episodes, mostly airing in the winter of 1990, is still producing new episodes. I mentioned I worked on Alf, and the second season, it was the number 10 show in America. 2 years later, it was off the air. When I took over The Simpsons in season 3, along with Mike Reiss, I was terrified because, like Alf, our audience was heavily composed of children. I was afraid the same thing would happen to us. We responded by working even harder on the production of the episodes. We worked 80-hour weeks. Once I was so exhausted, I took a vacation and slept 16 hours. That's how hits are made. And then what I want to make is we still work that hard. I'm doing this at 9 a.m. my time because we start the writing room at 10:30. I've literally, in the literal sense of that word, spent half my life in this office. Someone stop me. This is not a talk, it's a cry for help. The incredible effort I'm describing by all involved is the real reason for our success. There's no question the fact that the show is animated has helped its longevity. If Bart was a real boy, he'd now be a 40-year-old loser in short pants. But to me, without a doubt, the incredible work ethic on the part of all involved is the secret of The Simpsons. Thank you for giving me the chance to share it with you. Now, if you'll indulge me, I'm going to ask a few questions of myself, providing the question and the answer. What's your favorite season? Spring. Who are your favorite characters to write for? Lisa, because she's like me, and Comic Book Guy, because he's like me. Who's most responsible for the success of the show? Matt Groening, Jim Brooks, or Sam Simon? All of them. What does your job showrunner entail? If something goes wrong, it's my fault. Is it better writing with a partner or writing alone? When you write with a partner, you write twice as fast. When you write alone, you make twice as much. You be the judge. Who's your favorite guest star? All of them. Who's your least favorite? Amy Schumer. What advice would you give to an aspiring writer? Don't talk about writing, do it. That's it for the prepared part, except for this. I wanted to promote Olivia Colman did an episode for us called The 7-Beer Itch, and she is so fantastic in every way. I would vote for her for Queen, if you could vote for Queen. It airs February 12th in the UK. And also coming up later this year, we have the great Stephen Fry. Thank you, fans, for all you've done. There's no worry we'd be on as long as we have, or lasted as we have without you. And now I'm ready for questions.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very, very much, Al. That was so fascinating. When I look at you and I see Lisa, I just, you look exactly the same.
My brother, I'm sorry, my sister was Bart. She was the wild one.
Well, so we have some questions coming in, but just while we give a few more of you a chance to put those questions in and to respond, Tyler, I know you had a few questions from your huge experience looking at the philosophy of The Simpsons. So,
Yeah.
so a couple of questions are over to you.
I thought this would be a good framing one that would sum up everything you talked about, Al, which is great. Thanks. In terms of just sort of like thinking about humor and politics and satire and everything, it is a kind of, like The Simpsons and other avenues, a kind of thoughtful laughter, right? That like we make fun of these things and then you kind of think, and I was like, well, why is that funny? And all of that. Like, what do you think? What are your personal thoughts on the role of The Simpsons or maybe humor in general during these kind of dark and stormy political times?
Well, my favorite, again, it's a serious topic, but joke in the clip that we showed is that Homer isn't wearing a mask. And I think it's an illustration of what you just said. You don't really notice it till you go, oh, wait a minute, there's something off. Everybody else has a mask except him. What we're saying is if you're Homer Simpson, you don't wear a mask, which, it's a controversial issue here for some reason I can't possibly understand. But I think that you convince people a lot better gently, or, where you sneak up on them with your politics than by sort of, being blatant. Although I would also say in this era, we went from a show that, really did mock Democrats like Ted Kennedy and Republicans like the Bushes to one that, society has moved. So we've sort of had to move with it.
We have a lot of questions and comments coming through, so I'll turn it over in a minute. One comment I'm pulling out here is I wanted to relay that you look great for 60 or almost 60. And we have another question from Guy Incognito that says, can we please have an episode of The Simpsons with Cambridge in it? I like that question.
Oh, that would be great. Well, we did one where we went to the UK and Homer ran into the Queen, which is actually based on a spec script for the Golden Girls Mike Reiss and I had written years earlier. Instead of the Queen in the spec script, it was Mother Teresa. So we got all of our sort of hackney hack British jokes out of the way, like a guy coming into a cab and Homer asking for tea, and the guy has a tea service in his briefcase. And I remember there's a scene on the London Eye where Homer was looking at landmarks and says, "Oh, and there's Jimmy Page, the biggest thief of black music of all time." So we love doing that, but I would be happy to come back to Cambridge to do, maybe to do a Scottish episode featuring Willie, who's we had him do a little spot on the I or die amendment, and I wouldn't be surprised if that comes back.
We'll do whatever we can to make that happen. That sounds fun.
Yeah, we talked about Willie having a crush on Nicola Sturgeon, which I think that would be a great episode.
Julian, shall we open it up to the audience with some questions?
You heard it here first for Nicola Sturgeon. Just we've had a bunch of questions. Can I just ask one that's been fascinating me? Because you said how it's not realistic and that the characters haven't aged. Bart is not as old as he would be now. And the house hasn't changed, and the lifestyle hasn't changed, and the number of cars hasn't changed. And yet in the years since you first started, typical typical housing has become more expensive. And so the family that's represented by The Simpsons then is different from the family now. Do you think it's changed who The Simpsons are seen as?
The Atlantic magazine had one of the most thoughtful articles I've ever read on the show, a sad article, but it said that what we did, was an average family, middle class or maybe even lower middle class when we debuted in 1989, now is aspirational, that for one wage earner to have enough money to buy, a big house is like something that is kind of out of the reach of too many. And it made me feel a little dejected. I would also say that we always are conscious. A note that Matt and Jim always give is remember they don't have a lot of money. Like, so when they go to England, it's because they found $1,000 bill or they win a contest, or because money is so much of an issue for so many. And I did not grow up upper class. My father owned a hardware store, so the writing staff all comes to this with the same point of view. And yeah, sadly, I think now, Marge would have to have a job if we started the show. Also, the family would be blended, it would be diverse, would have kids from different marriages. I mean, it would be a different thing.
So let's move on to some of the questions that have come on in, and there's a whole bunch of ideas. But one just picks up from that from Hugo Hernandez, who says, "Hi Al, huge Simpsons fan here. Do you think future generations will be able to look back at the show and be able to read the political pulse of the nation?"
I think that the show unintentionally is a pretty good time capsule. And in my humble estimation, holds up pretty well. We're on Disney Plus every season with the latest, and we're, I believe, #1, even ahead of The Mandalorian. And I believe that's because even episodes from 1989 and 90, again, they were written a year in advance. People go, "Oh, this, it relates to me now, but I also get to see what things are like then." The biggest thing that's changed, and we've gotten a lot of debate, is, of course, the kids have iPhones, and which are kind of expensive. But I swear, if you saw Homer, using a bell and candle telephone, you'd go, "Wait, this is too stupid. You got to move with the times." But it's an easy crutch for the writers, I'll admit. Like, when you have something that you can immediately call up any photo or information from the history of mankind, it's a very nice thing to have at your writing disposal.
And then Matthew Griffiths asked, "What's the most difficult decision you've had to make about whether to keep a joke or plot line in the show?"
I'll say, the kind of thing that bothers me, and thankfully we haven't done it too often. We did a show in season 4 where Bart we said he had Tourette's syndrome, and just started saying things that were very foul. And a woman wrote and said that her son actually had Tourette's syndrome and saw it and started crying because he's like, "I didn't know this is something that's supposed to be bad." So we took that out. That's the biggest thing. We recognize that we're a show that airs to children, so we're not going to show Maggie drinking bleach, even though the president would have advised it. We would just be cognizant of the fact that we want to impart a message, and we're not a kids show, but we're also responsible to that group of under 18 people watching.
And we've had a couple of other questions about sort of, when you talk about the offensiveness piece there, which I thought was quite interesting. So one question from Laura Robachek was about political incorrectness and the Apu character. You know, traditionally, The Simpsons hasn't worried about offending certain groups. So what's different there? But also, Rebecca Stankham asking whether you've ever criticised Scientology. Apparently, it's been said that The Simpsons has never criticised Scientology.
We did a show, I believe the cult was called Movementarianism, that David Merkin produced, which was a veiled critique of such things. And we, in terms of Apu, I would say times change, and you know, what was considered mainstream in 1989 isn't necessarily now. And moving forward, our characters will be voiced by actors that are appropriate to the roles. And I appreciate both sides of the argument.
Just actually, because there's been another question that's come up about how you manage to keep those voices going for 31 years.
They're the best. You know, you have these people that aren't just voices, that are the characters, that know them in and out. And there is no question we would not be here if it weren't for, you know, Dan and Julie and Harry and Hank and Yardley and Nancy. And, you know, and Tress and Pamela, I mean, all the cast, we just, Kevin Michael Richardson, they're all fantastic. And the great thing is that when you write a joke, if it bombs, you know, it's the joke's fault. It's not the actors, because they're all the best. And, you know, if you can't, you know, get a laugh or a tear out of Yardley saying something as Lisa, then it's not working.
And, I mean, but presumably the reliance on particular actors means that at some point they won't be able to keep that going. Do you think about the end of it?
I can't even think about it, you know. They'll just say, I think The Simpsons will be around a lot longer than me. It's, you know, it's one of those things like Mickey Mouse, you know, where you're just, you know, it will be around forever, in my view.
But I mean, and another question from Benjamin Davies, I'll try to get the names in where I can. Has the audience been changing over time? Has it become a more left-wing or a right-wing audience? How do you keep gaining a new audience?
Well, what I was told by someone who marketed the show internationally is that it's amazingly evergreen. It's a generation grows up with it, and some people go, okay, I did that when I was 11 and I don't watch it as much anymore, but the new 11-year-olds come along. And I mean, seeing on the chat, what people love is when their parents, they're watching it with their kids, exposing their kids to what made them laugh, and seeing their kids laugh is, you know, and to me, the most rewarding part of the job by far is people have come up to me and they've said, my parents were splitting up and it was a really rough time, and I watched The Simpsons to get through it. And I go, well, that couldn't mean more. And when you are able to reach people worldwide, I was in Siena, Italy, and I saw they were selling Vitruvian Man Homer shirts. And I go, wow, like, it's just so weird that I work in this job that has this, right, you know, reach, you know, that we all do things in a little room and don't kind of get how big the show is really. And you go everywhere and you see it referenced, and it's amazing. I'm very blessed to have been here.
And I mean, there must be this sort of constant pressure, though, to come up with exciting new things. I mean, do you ever struggle to come up with new ideas? Do you find yourself saying, look, I've already done this, we have to...
Well, pardon me, Jesus College, but every goddamn day. Yes, I do. It's so hard because we've done 700 episodes, and that means actually about 1,400 plots. And, you know, we have great writers, you know, including Matt Selman, including people who've been with us 10, 20 years. Some who've been from the beginning, Mike Reese, who I wrote with at the start. And the hardest part by far is coming up with an idea. And I try this all the time where I go, oh, season 5, oh, season 12. And you're just trying to do something in a new way. And the only thing I'll say is, unfortunately, there are always new problems facing people in this world, and it's good for us that there are problems that families face. Bad for the world. I wish there weren't, you know, new challenges, but that's what keeps the show fresh, I think.
I'll summarize a couple of questions that I've seen coming up too about that kind of intergenerational thing. The fact that we've seen people growing up, like you touched upon already, Al, in terms of people that grew up with The Simpsons, now their kids are watching The Simpsons, and also the question of how has the humor changed in your opinion from, you know, season 1 to season 15 to season 32? Like, what have you noticed, especially because like you've kind of been the architect sort of, and like the some of like the style of the humor of the Simpsons over the
Well,
years?
there were waves that it went through after 9/11, for example, one of the few shows that's still on that was on then. I had a reporter tell me, well, you can't make fun of the president anymore. And I thought, really? Even the president will do something a little silly now and then, you know? And so there are different shifts in like what, you know, for a while we were able to show Homer's butt as a punchline, then we weren't, now we are, which is kind of trivial, but it kind of, you know, shows the history of, you know, like political thought. And my main view is that we move a lot less than the target. That we approach the show the same way we did in season one. You know, Matt and Jim are always saying, let's find relatable stories about a family. Let's, you know, have an emotion, and let's like try to just really explore what life is like for people. And we do it the same way that we did it. And what's happened is that we were considered extremely offensive and controversial. People told their kids not to watch often at the beginning. And now we're considered, even though we haven't changed, you know, an institution. And I would also say, you know, people say, oh, we're anti-Christian and we do a lot of religious jokes. But I'd also go, who would you prefer for a neighbor, Flanders or Homer? You know, and I go, it's a sort of an even-handed look. You know, Flanders is a great guy in more ways than Homer. So, we just try to do our thing and then let other people judge what they think of what we've done.
And has that changed as a result of other shows coming out? I mean, Family Guy, for example, has been mentioned in some of the questions.
No, I mean, I'm really glad they have. I mean, in 1989, ironically, the year we premiered, The Little Mermaid premiered in features. So that really was the renaissance here for animation, both in features and television. And I love animation. I love Pixar movies. I love the Fox animated shows. I love South Park, Big Mouth. I mean, there's just so many great things that have come. And I'm not saying because of us, but I'm saying because animation is now, and sadly with the pandemic, it's one of the few things you can do where you didn't do it remotely. You don't have to have anybody come to anything. You can have your cast record from home. So it's probably even going to get bigger. But as an animation fan, I'm thrilled about that aspect of it.
And is there anything you'd like to see change in how comedy writers, satirists tackle their subjects?
Well, the thing I would like to see change, and this has been said by quite a few people who've done a great job of ridiculing Trump, the talk show hosts, et cetera, they really wish they didn't have to be making the jokes about the same subject. You know, I mean, it's an abnormality in our system, as the events of this last week have clearly shown, that they really want to go away. I prefer when you have people of good intent in both parties and you may disagree about solutions, but you believe in, law and order and the Constitution. And so I'm hoping after January 20th that we go back to having more things to make fun of rather than sort of the same one thing.
Now, you've had various former presidents on the show.
Never. We asked them all and they all said no. We never asked Trump, but there was a very brief discussion with people that worked for Obama, but it turned into that they had to be like a lesson that we taught. And while I admire Obama greatly, I didn't want to be, sort of an after school special. But we did have one voice, Theodore Roosevelt. I will say, if we had to get a president, that's a good one to get.
So you won't be featuring Trump, but you won't be shocked to know that there's been a few questions about the sort of recent memes that have been going around how the Simpsons predicted everything. The clip you showed earlier had some riots. They weren't quite the same as the footage from the Capitol. And there's the groundskeeper Willie image that's been going on. How does it feel when the characters sort of come to life, or it becomes the show becomes so embedded in real politics?
I have to say, on the staff, we think it's kind of cool. As I said, I'm kind of debunking most of it. Although I will say this was not a prediction, but a very insane, odd coincidence. We did the episode prior to 2000 about the New York trade towers, and there was a brochure that Bart held that said New York on $9 a day, and the trade towers were behind it, like an 11, and it looked like a 9/11. And I go, I don't know how that happened. It's just the most bizarre actual coincidence. But as I say, the majority of predictions, Trump was a minor, candidate in 2000. He thought about running on the Reform Party. So it wasn't, the most far-fetched thing to happen. It was something that could have been in the realm of possibility. And I think he wasn't even the first pitch of that joke. It was Johnny Depp for some reason. So we could have had President Johnny Depp. I'm sorry. I'm sorry we didn't leave it in.
So it's your fault entirely that we didn't have Depp, right? I mean, that could have been a.
Whenever I'm a showrunner, it's my fault. Although the showrunner that predicted Trump was Mike Scully. It was a great episode by Dan Grady.
So it's not your fault personally. That's
well, I'm trying to give him credit, not blame. But yes.
We've had a few questions that have come in, and we've had lots of questions all about sort of lots of episodes, lots of other things that are Simpsons related. But a few more questions. People want to know a bit more about you. So you went to Harvard presumably very early because you were 20 when you graduated, I think. So you presumably went when you were.
I went at 16. I was a math major.
But also, both the story about that, but also whether you think being a mathematician changes how you do satire, how you write.
There is a surprising number of mathematicians. I should say, it's an insult to professional mathematicians, but people with math backgrounds like Ken Keeler, Stuart Burns, David X. Cohen, who've worked for The Simpsons and some for Futurama. I think there is a similarity. And Mike Reese, who was my writing partner for many years, also was excellent at math. And I believe it's, math or logic and joke writing have this sort of similar desire for the perfect, ending, the perfect proof, the perfect result. So working on proofs is a little bit like trying to find the joke. But I mean, again, I don't want to insult real mathematicians. I will say my minor mathematical claim is, as an undergrad, Andrew Wiles, who solved Fermat's theorem, was a teacher of mine for one semester. And so that's it. That's my, but no.
That's quite something. And I hadn't realized there were so many mathematicians in
there
that.
Are, yeah. And as I say, it's an honor to be speaking to Cambridge because Isaac Newton, is my, say, who could I meet in the history of mankind? It'd probably be him. I mean, totally revolutionized everything and still probably the greatest scientific mind of all time.
Well, as we were saying when we were chatting beforehand, we hope we can get you to Cambridge and show you Newton's copy of the Principia Mathematica and all the other features that we have here.
We have Isaac Newton's apple tree.
We do.
Just repeat to the audience, Isaac Newton did his best work during a plague. So I can only wait to see what comes out in about 6 months. The new physics.
You slightly skipped the bit where about how you got to Harvard at 16, and you were always extremely talented, or?
Well, as I mentioned, my father owned a hardware store, and I lived behind it in a house like about 100 yards away. So he was always saying, "Oh, you're home. Come up in the store, and you got to work." So to avoid working there, I studied extremely hard. I worked my butt off, and I was able to get into college at 16. And I was fortunate. There were a couple of math programs I took in the summer at the University of Chicago that I think helped me a lot. One I took also in Michigan that was also in a previous year taken by Steve Ballmer of Microsoft. And so, to get where I am, obviously my mother and father were huge, and these teachers, these, people that, really helped you out when you were a kid to see what else was out there and how you could study harder. That's my advice, even if you want to be a writer, is just, if you work hard, you'll get where you want to go.
That's a wonderful message for people listening, and maybe you'll inspire more people here. I have to say, we've had loads of questions. They keep flooding in, but the one that's the single most common and most popular question at the moment is, what did Amy Schumer do?
I won't say anything further. But, that's it.
Because you clearly have this astonishing memory for everything that's happened throughout the whole thing. I mean, did you always have such memory? Is the show now you? Are you now the show?
I would say that we have a database of all the scripts, but of course that's 50 pages times 700 episodes, so that's quite a lot of material. Between Matt Selman and myself, I think we remember most of the things that happened. But I have to admit, one of the things I'm most embarrassed about online is if people spot an actual joke we did twice, like we had Homer saying to Marge, watching fireworks, let's make some fireworks of our own. And then he starts making fireworks with powder. We did that twice. And I that's on me. I'm sorry.
So,
The Frinkiac website is a good database for, because I try to do that too. I don't like repeating the same Simpsons references and teaching and everything. So I go back and use that one actually to make sure it's like, when have they used this before? I was like, oh yeah, they actually used that 10 years later. That's a good one for people that are interested in all Simpsons, everything.
so please do, if there's a link to that, do put it in the chat so people can have a look. And I mean, has the show ever really been at risk? I mean, people have talked about great episodes, weaker episodes. Season 9 seems to keep getting mentioned. Has there ever been a risk of that?
The only risk has been like almost any television show. There's a budget issue, and we've always been great in the ratings. This season, we're the #1 scripted show on Fox, and I think #2 on all networks. Season 32. There's never been a ratings issue. There's never been an issue about how much ads on The Simpsons sell for, which is the key barometer of whether we're worth it to the network. At one point in season 23, there was a discussion that said that the show had gotten so expensive that they really wanted to make a cut to continue it indefinitely. And everybody took cuts. The writers took an 11% pay cut, which I love the show. Believe me, I was happy to do it. And there was an episode, Holidays of Future Past, which was going to be the last episode if we weren't able to come up with a budget agreement. But we did, and as I say, I think it'll be around for a long time.
There's a good question here. Sorry, Julian, jump in. Characters on the Simpsons for Neil are predominantly, white or yellow, and the idea of kind of like increasing multicultural sensitivities. Do you have thoughts on? And like, I know the new Carl voice actor, for instance, I forgot his name, Alex something, but he's good. I like him.
Yes.
What do you feel about that?
Well, it's a kind of, this is what I say about different standards change. Originally, an animator, Georgie Pelusi, suggested to Matt Groening the characters be yellow, which we thought was great because it sort of says that there's we're trying to be, beyond, say, racial characterizations. But then we also thought, it would be great. I was a big advocate of, let's make some characters African American. At the time, I wasn't running the show, but when you did an animated show, people would just give your basic cast the voices. So Hank Azaria was doing somebody like Carl. In season 4, I started hiring people who are, people of color to play like Sideshow Raheem when we had Krusty's sidekick who was African American. I hired Kevin Michael Richardson in 2010 as a regular cast member. Seeing what would happen, and terrific. I'm so glad that Kevin and Alex and others have joined our show. I think if we were casting the show today, obviously we would just be different as the way we would cast the characters, but we change with the times.
And just to pick up on that, because you talked about the casting, has the writing staff changed in terms of demographics as well during that time?
Yes.
Has that changed the tone as well?
More women, more diverse writers. When I started, again, this is just because of the way things were, I inherited a cast that was nearly all white, writing staff that was nearly all white male. The majority of my hires have been diversity hires, although I will say they're also, of course, great writers, which is, what we're always looking for.
No, just to move on to this, because these issues about how you structure the humor and how you fit it with other things and some of the demographic pieces. You did a crossover episode with Family Guy.
Yes.
I'm reliably told that. I'm discovering my knowledge of The Simpsons is very weak compared to many of the attendees. How did you blend the two styles with that? Because there are very different approaches to many of these things, very different humor, very different angles.
Yeah, there were two at the same time. We did one with Futurama, which we wrote, and which was a little bit easier to blend animation-wise because they're all Matt Groening characters, so they, we're in the same animated universe. Rich Appel, a number of former Simpson writers who works on Family Guy, approached us and said, "We'd like to do a crossover. We think we could be true to the spirit of both shows." Sent a script to Jim and Matt and me, which we all approved with very, very minor requests. We had David Silverman, who's been, as I mentioned, one of our longtime geniuses, directed the Simpson movie, go over to help with the animation. So I thought it was really funny. It was their work. They wrote the episode, and we were, our characters were guest stars, but I'm glad we did it. I think it was a one-time thing. I wouldn't, do it again. I would, but so the Futurama, I really love that we did that. But there's like, I like crosswords, but I think you can only do them once.
And one thing you've also only done once is the Simpsons movie.
Well, yes.
Far.
Part of the issue is we, have been thwarted by good ratings where, it really, really was hard to do a movie and the show at the same time. And I literally in, like the year it came out, I was working 7-day weeks, 16-hour days, to get everything done. We've talked about a second movie. What I think will delay it even further now is that movies themselves are really backlogged. I mean, I just saw Soul, which was fantastic. That's a movie that was going to be theatrical, and I'm sure it would have made hundreds of millions of dollars. I know the whole industry is just praying for, not just because of movies, but because of everything, because of the whole tragedy, a swift end of the epidemic and the vaccines to work properly. But I wouldn't see a Simpson movie being on anybody's priority immediately, just because you've got so much great Disney stuff that's already, backed up.
Sarah's got a question here about the nature of just like digital consumption now, in terms of now that The Simpsons is on, as a streaming thing. What have you noticed has been kind of changed in terms of like what you can or can't do on the show, or maybe just any thoughts on like audience patterns when everything is streaming and available all the time? Do we still think of The Simpsons as a TV show when it's so many things now?
Well, I'm proud to say no changes in the way we approach the show. No different network notes. No, when we were bought by Disney, Bob Iger and everyone there basically said, "Do what you do." That's why we bought Simpsons, which has been fantastic. And one thing I should mention, although I would love to do another feature, I don't think it's imminent. We did do a short this year, Playdate with Destiny, that you can see on Disney Plus, and I love doing those. I think Maggie is the new Charlie Chaplin, and I would love to do more of those, or even if it was just like an exclusive short for Disney Plus would be fantastic.
Just to step back to the original Simpsons movie, because one of the most amazing things about that for me and various others was that very, very powerful environmental message that really sort of made that front and center. Is that something which might come back through in The Simpsons in a very strong, powerful way?
Yeah, I mean, that was one of the things that really helped the first movie, is you want to think about an issue that is a source of humor and will also be something that people are still going to be caring about passionately, 10 or 20 years along. And there's nothing more so in the environment for me. It was actually Matt Groening, the first day we were pitching on the movie, who said, "I understand that in areas of the Midwestern US, there is too much pig crap." And so that's what I want to do the movie about. And Jim said, "I love it." And so that was about the easiest part of the movie. It was there the first day, and it was all, figuring out how, and the dome idea came up the first day too. And it was all about how do we, make it look effortless by doing a lot of work on the script.
Sorry, I'm losing track because questions are coming in so much faster than I can even read them, let alone doing more. And so people are quite interested about sort of your own career trajectory. And so one interesting comment was about
Simpsons.
Well, it's like, so someone's like, because actors often get typecast. And while you clearly love The Simpsons, has the huge success stopped you from doing other things that you'd want to do? And what would you like to do if you were able to do something else?
I'd like to do animation. I think it's the greatest. And I've done a couple of things. I was able to work on a spot with Funny or Die, where we had all the SNL ex-presidents support the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau in 2010, a live action thing, which I was really thrilled to be asked by Adam McKay to do. And, but, to me, I feel a little guilty, like, if I'm doing something that's not The Simpsons, I just go, I gotta get back to The Simpsons. I think of other ideas, but I go, I want to make sure that every Simpsons thing I'm doing is the best it can be.
And so in your free time, you know, do you watch The Simpsons in your free time? Do you, what do you watch? I think that we're missing.
I would say that the shows that I watch most frequently are The Crown, and I just watched the Borat movie, which I thought was fantastic. So I try to watch stuff that's, you know, not mine, because I'm not totally self-centered, but I don't have that much free time, so it's very picky and choosy.
So just to follow us on this, we had a couple of questions. One was, what was your favorite Pixar film? And are there any animated series or films that we've missed, that you've enjoyed that we've missed or may have missed?
Well, I would say all the Toy Story movies are great. And I would honestly go and say Pixar really has never failed. But the Toy Story ones to me are the most amazing. And we just did a parody on our previous Halloween show that I'm sure will air pretty soon in the UK if it hasn't already. So they're the gold standard. And then in terms of animation, if you aren't familiar with Miyazaki's movies like Spirited Away or My Neighbor Totoro, like I go, those are the best. That's something that's just like, you know, a totally different sensibility, but unbelievably great.
So yeah, no, I mean, I agree, utterly fantastic.
There's a
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, Julian, I wanted to jump in. There's a couple of questions I wanted to summarize on both Niall and I think Anjan had a question about different writers over the past years, and some of them seem to be getting involved again, has seen the return of several writers. And a combined question was, could you bring Schwartzwalder back? And then my follow-up question is he real?
He's very real. He has a Twitter account at JJ Schwartzwalder, and I know he would appreciate me saying this. He writes books, which is why we won't get him back. He writes a series of sort of surreal detective novels, and he's great. He is. It's funny because you know, just because I mean he is on Twitter now, but because somebody's like, you know, slightly not in the public eye, people start like mythologizing the person. He's just a really talented, really friendly guy, like when you know him, and has still, and it won't be broken, written the most Simpson episodes, 59.
So coming back to some of the sort of celebs and people you've had, and I guess one of the celebs, somebody's asked, you know, said, you've got a great voice yourself. Have you actually voiced any of the characters?
No, and I'll tell you, I've occasionally attempted at the table when somebody hasn't been there, you know, back before we had Zoom capabilities. There's a reason that they are professional and I am not. I mean, somebody like Harry Shearer, who I think did this for him, you know, his vocal talent is so unbelievable. So metronomic in its consistency and so funny, and you know, just think about Flanders, one of my favorite characters on the show. Is such a terrific character, and they're all great. And Nancy does so many fantastic kids, and you just go, they're all different, they're all genius. So you know, I don't put myself in their league in any way.
So I mean, we did have Harry here a couple of years ago, and that was also amazing. You know, a very different sensation.
It goes into the characters, amazing. And Burns, everybody loves Burns.
And they did that night. And I think we have a video available for, on the Jesus College site.
In the chat.
That when we finish with this one. But how does it work with the various celebs that you do have? Do you approach them asking, do they write to you saying, please, 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 can I be in an episode? Do you write an episode around them, or you just slot them into what you already plan to do? How do you think about that?
The most exciting one that I asked was, I was in the rewrite room, this was now about 15 years ago, and Eric Idle walked in and said, put me in the show. So we thought for a year, and then we made him a documentary filmmaker who's now appeared several times in the episode. And, you know, obviously Monty Python is one of my very top idols in comedy, and to have him in the show, it was fantastic. Michael Palin just did the show as well. Generally what happens is that we as I mentioned, Stephen Fry, we think obviously he's fantastic. And so we wrote a script that, you know, he would be perfect for and sent it to him. And we're thrilled that not only did he do it, but because of Zoom, we actually had him at the read twice. So you got to have him, you know, in person on screen for a couple hours, and it was enormous honor.
But how did you get somebody like Michael Jackson to appear the way he did?
He asked if he could write a song for Bart, and then did an episode. I don't really want to go into that episode too much, except to say I co-wrote it, but it's not viewable now, and I agreed with that decision.
Josh has a question. Sorry to jump in again. And I've been wondering about this one too. Did you actually get to talk to Thomas Pynchon for his guest appearance?
I like Schwartzwelder, friendly, just a great guy. I can say that he wanted to do the show because he watched it with his son, who was a fan. And what was really funny is we had him back for a second appearance, and he goes, "Oh, now I can join the Screen Actors Guild." I think he wanted to run for president of it. So yes, I mean, there's so many surreal things. I met Tony Blair. I recorded him in 10 Downing Street, not a joke. And then some photographer filmed me coming out with the script like it was a scandal, like Tony Blair recording during the Iraq War. Stuff that I would never have believed would happen just to a kid from the Midwest like me, because of The Simpsons. It's amazing. It's just surreal.
And I mean, because you've had Stephen Hawking a few times, and you've had various other academics.
And him too. He came to the reads. Yeah, he was such a fan. It was wonderful.
A very parochial question, I guess. Are there any other Cambridge academics that you'd like to have, and can we help you get them?
Well, I'll say one thing is the less known about Stephen Hawking is he's really funny, a great sense of humor. And so if you have other academics who are as funny as he, sure, let's bring him on.
Can I point out some Cambridge trivia for everyone at home that Stephen Hawking and I both keep his Simpsons action figure on our desk. He did at the time, but I thought that was kind of cool. Got the boxing glove and everything.
Yes, he was just, again, I go, the Isaac Newton of our time, and we got to meet him. I mean, it's amazing.
And how much do the celebs add to it? I mean, is it that they help you to expand your audience, they inspire you, or they make a better show? Well,
it depends. Somebody like Albert Brooks, when you record him, you get like tons of material. Like we had him in once for a 2-page part. He recorded a half hour worth of material. And, with the Simpsons movie, he was just cracking us up with his multiple takes on things. So there's that. Then there's just people where you go like, it's just, the part for Thomas Pynchon was written for him and he did what we wrote, but just to have him on, I go, I'll always be really proud. What a cool thing that we are able to have him as a voice on our show.
It must be wonderful to have the freedom to explore the whole Simpsons world, but there may be some stories that you can't set in that world. Are there things that you'd really like to be able to do, but they just don't fit?
There's almost nothing. I mean, there's certain things that, if Homer did something where he cheated on Marge, or you would go too much, you can't take it. So there's like invisible rules like that. But, we can go forward in time, we can go backward, we can have them do historical episodes. We just did one that was great in Rome. We did an art episode where Lisa was Da Vinci, so there's almost nothing that I can think of that we couldn't do. So it really is like it's like a little bit of a weight hanging over our head. Like you can't think of an idea. Well, you've got the whole universe and time and space at your disposal. Why not?
And then, I mean, I guess the flip side to that, is there something that you've cut, a joke in particular, that you've cut and really regretted taking out?
Almost anything that got a laugh stayed in. There's nothing, nothing that I, we thought, oh, we should have done that didn't stay, wasn't at least tried.
Susanna has a good question here. Just because at the very beginning of your talk, we were saying a little bit about how The Simpsons reflects things, but also kind of shapes the world around it too. Susanna's question is, what sense of responsibility do you feel toward viewers of the topics you choose, whether it's climate change or race or these sort of things? How do you feel you can, or maybe want to shape the audience's views, or just kind of like the world around from which The Simpsons comes?
My only rule is I'm honest to myself. We, from before he was elected, we're against Trump. We put out, things that to me, we wouldn't have ever done in any other case, but, having him with a Hitler book beside his bed, which he did. And, we weren't going to sugarcoat it. I mean, I believe then and I believe now that he was not mainstream and is dangerous. In terms of climate change, as a person who respects science and data, there's just no question that it occurs. And I have to be true to that. I can, we can depict people who are against, that being known, but I can't sort of go against what I think is true and scientific. Now, there's a way of making, a point by having Homer say something stupid. And the thing is, people know Homer is stupid, so we do it that way.
And actually, just picking up on that, if Homer had managed to stay awake, who would he have voted for?
I always think when people say, who would he have voted for in 2016 or 2020? I think he would have forgotten. The ending of that is the truth. I think Marge would have said vote not for Trump. Homer would have listened to her and then forgotten. Marge would have voted for Trump. Lisa would have voted for Trump. Was she old enough? Not for Trump. Marge would have voted for not Trump, and Lisa would have voted for not Trump if she were old enough. But Homer wouldn't have voted.
I mean, again, so we're still getting sort of well over 50 questions still left. So we're definitely not going to get through them all in the next 10 minutes or so. Show running. It's not something people necessarily know all that much about as a role. What for you is the best or the worst aspect of being a showrunner? Other than presumably
something like this is the best aspect, is to get to talk to people and to get to talk about your job from 30 years ago and people actually give a damn is amazing. The hardest part is, like I said, and there's two showrunners now, me and Matt Selman. It's that if something goes wrong, if there's a mistake made, it's the showrunner's ultimate responsibility. So, and that's everything. That's the humor, the budget, the production getting done, the guest stars being recorded, and it's pressure. It's real pressure, and everyone that's done it has felt that pressure, and it's been an amazing group.
Somebody's pointed out that tonight on Channel 4 is The Good, the Sad, and the Drugly. Lisa's famous essay. How do you think about that episode now?
Well, I think about that episode a lot because it was about Lisa being medicated to the point where she just saw smiley faces everywhere, even though the world is really bad. And I go, I think that's going to happen more and more. Things don't get better.
Here's a fun one. I'm going to combine a few questions so we can get through them. But in your personal opinion, Al, funniest joke, and do you have a favorite episode overall?
I'll mention a Stephen Hawking joke I wrote. Is one of my favorites that I've pitched. Is Stephen Hawking gives a speech and the town is really excited, and Homer goes, "Larry Flint is right." I go, that to me, so epitomizes the American political discourse of today. Favorite episode, I have a soft spot for a number of them. The Christmas episode that debuted the show, Homer at the Bat. My wife is a Simpsons writer, Stephanie Gillis, who wrote one with Anne Hathaway. That was fantastic, and Anne was one of the best guest stars we ever had. Just unbelievably talented and nice. I wrote one, again, these are not saying they're the best episodes ever, but they mean the most to me personally, about Homer being alone at Christmas, just because I know people get really sad over Christmas, and especially, this didn't air this year, but this past year, people were alone, and it was just sort of an attempt to make, people go, yeah, I understand. It's when you're told you're going to be happy and you're not, it's a tough thing.
People around the world watch The Simpsons and presumably get some impression of what the US is like from that. Do you have a particular view of America that you're trying to project through the show?
Well, there was an election where an online poll where they're asking to vote the greatest Briton, and I think Churchill won, of course, but then I think Homer was second, which leads me to go, he's not a person, nor is he a Briton. And I think what I started to realize is that in some cases people are laughing at us and not with us, but if it grows the audience, so be it. There's a lot about Homer that is not exactly flattering to the US and is accurate. I think that subconsciously we're writing him that way. Yeah.
I mean, one of the amazing things about a show like The West Wing was that it did directly influence politics. There were things that happened in the UK Parliament, for example, that were based on episodes in The West Wing. Are there any examples of real political movements or outcomes or significant change that came out of The Simpsons?
I don't know, because one of the biggest well-known political Simpsons fans is Ted Cruz. He auditioned for a job on the show. He has quoted lines that I wrote, and I think, how could someone who loves the show so much have taken the lessons that he has? So I don't know. You just put what you do out there, and you hope that it inspires people to look for the truth, to see that in the world, which is so difficult, that there is hope if you love people and if you're kind to others, and cherish your family.
So are you saying that if you'd offered him the job, we wouldn't have seen the problems over the last few weeks?
I can't bear that responsibility. His audition wasn't very good. As I say, if you're the showrunner, it's all your fault.
And I mean, you've run this for so long. You're presumably a somewhat different person from what you were at the beginning. Do you look, I mean, has it changed you? Has it changed how you see the world, how you see your work? What do you think of what your younger you did?
It's corny, but I just feel so blessed. I mean, I go in the UK. Here's an example of something that happened to me. I was on an interview show, a radio show in the UK, and I mentioned, they're talking about soccer, and they said, would you ever have had George Best on the show? And I said, I don't know who that is. And of course, he's a famous football star. And I got into a cab, and the guy goes, "Oh, you're the guy who didn't know who George Best was." I'm going, like, what a strange thing. It makes you feel like you're a character in a television show, strange and wonderful. So believe me, I know who George Best is now, very much.
You're getting close to the 1,000th episode, is that right?
We're going to air our 700th around March in the US, and then slightly later UK. So,
you should be already writing, I guess, a year ahead. So you're getting close. Do you have any thoughts for big ceremonials like that?
The honest truth about when I started the job was Mike and I both thought, well, Jim Brooks is the best. And I loved Life in Hell by Matt. And I thought Sam was extremely talented. So I thought this is going to be a good show. I mean, I'm working with the best people. I didn't know, of course, that it would be on 30 years. I thought it was going to be a hit when I saw the first episode put together. I just thought this is the best thing I've ever been privileged to work on in my life. And that came true. But like I said, in season 3, I was petrified that the show would be, there's a lot of like youth-oriented shows that are flashes in the pan. And I think I can safely say at this point, we're not.
And I think that is remarkable that it's managed to last so long. Now, some animated characters have managed to live on effectively forever beyond the original creative voice teams, Mickey Mouse, Bugs Bunny. Will people in the future talk about the Simpsons and the characters in the same sort of way? Can you aspire to that sort of thing?
I don't, as I say, our current cast is perfect. I've just never seen an animated success like the Simpsons not live forever. That's all I would say.
So, I mean, it's been really fantastic, Alan. We still have 40-something questions still there. And I'm really sorry for the people whose question we haven't been able to pick up on, but I think we should let Al have a bit of time off. So just before we finish, Tyler, over to you for the first thanks.
Yeah, first thanks, and virtually, I guess my seeing happy birthday idea is going to be a little tricky over Zoom, but we should all wish Al a happy 60th, and thanks for spending his birthday eve with us. We're going to have more events coming up soon through Cambridge. So next on the horizon is the Social Dilemma, the Netflix documentary on social media and misinformation news and everything that's coming up next month. So keep an eye out for that. We've got a few more. So follow us on Twitter, and that's the best way to reach us, really. And watch me stalk celebrities like Ricky Gervais online, and kind of like see how some of this goes. But yeah, stay tuned. We have a lot more coming. Thanks, Al.
And thank you, Al, from Jesus College and for the Intellectual Forum. It's been utterly fantastic to have you here. Thank you for spending the last night of your 50s here with us. I mean, maybe there are better things to do with the end of your 50s, but I hope that's it. I hope we can invite you back in person to show you around. And again, can I also just have a quick advert? So as I said, on the 18th, we have cyclist Chris Boardman, and on the 20th, for the US inauguration, we'll hear from the former British Deputy Ambassador about what's going on. And you can compare the political analysis through The Simpsons versus the British Diplomatic Corps. Thank you very, very much. Al, thank you so much for joining us. Have a very good evening, everybody.